societal impact of the crisis, to what extent this crisis will influence, impact the society in a way, looking at how it will impact the way we live, the way we think, the way we interact all together. Are we as humans coming closer, or are we eventually taking even more distance among ourselves in our communities, but also across culture? To what extent the coronavirus crisis will have an impact on our values, impact on our priorities, to what extent it will contribute to build a new cohesion among communities and society, a new sense of solidarity, or at the opposite, will it contribute to a sort of a blame game and different among culture? For the first time ever, humanity, wherever people are sitting and staying and living, is confronted to the same threat. This has never, in a way, happened in the history of humanity. So the question that I would like to put forward to our guest is, will this crisis that is touching and affecting the whole humanity can contribute to create also a sense of belonging, a sense of one single humanity beyond differences, beyond culture, and beyond civilizations? So I think we will have a very interesting discussion. We have three outstanding speakers coming from very different perspectives, from very different parts of the world. I'm very pleased to introduce Mrs. Hakima Al Haité, who is a former Minister of Environment in Morocco, and in that capacity who has been the head of the COP21 in Marrakesh, so the major UN summit on climate change. She is also the president of International Liberal, which is the gathering of all liberal parties around the world. Then we will have Ruben Vardanyan, who has a long list also of affiliation, but I will start with the one that really matters the most for 𝗬𝗎C. Ruben is a member of the supervisory board of the Dialogue of Civilization Institute, which is also represented here today by its chairman, Dr. Yakunin. We will be giving the closing remark. And Ruben is first and foremost also a very well-known investment banker in Russia, is the chair of the Troika Dialogue, but also very involved in philanthropy, and particularly with the Aurora Prize for Awakening Humanity. So I think this is very much what we also want to discuss today. And the third speaker is our good friend from India, coming from the beautiful region of Kerala, and Minister Alphons was a very prominent minister in the previous Modi government, Minister of Culture and Tourism, and is also a very prominent and influential member of the parliament in India. So as you can see, very different background, very different perspective. We should have a very interesting discussion. So ladies first, Hakima, for an initial statement, and then Ruben, and then Alphons, and then we have a discussion all together. And let me just, that will be my last word, given some sort of housekeeping information. If anyone wants to ask a question or make a comment, because we will have about 40 minutes for an interactive discussion, please click on the icon, the chat icon, and so you can send your question as of now, questions or comments, and I will be taking the question and conveying all the questions and comments to the speaker. Thank you, Hakima.
Thank you, Jean-Christophe. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to attend this webinar. I hope you are all keeping safe, and I hope that our audience is safe. We are living a very special moment in our history, as you say, Jean-Christophe. Can we imagine that 3 billion human beings are confined? This is not a fiction, and we are not on another planet. We are well on Earth, but Earth where we are feeling threatened, where each country erect barriers, close its border, stop all activities, including that of breathing freely in the street. Never such drastic action, indeed, has been taken by any country in the history of humanity. Terrorism, migration crisis, climate change, economic crisis. No one of those challenges had generated such extreme individual, let's say, individual and radical reaction on the part of state. More than any economic crisis, COVID-19 is more devastating because it targets the very core of our system, the human, his social organization, his culture. Although many pandemics have raged in the world, and we know the historical Spanish pandemic, but they are either old and are part of the side of the history that human believe to have overcome by its wealth, progress, and power, or they are still raged in countries qualified as underdeveloped and are part of the side of the history that we want to ignore because it doesn't concern us. Humanity has therefore not capitalized on the historic health crisis which affected particularly all continents well before the globalization. Remember the figures we announced about the Spanish crisis, more than between 30 and 50 million deaths all over the world. COVID-19 just has demonstrated that the origin of pandemic is not always associated with underdevelopment, that the borders of contamination, as you said, Jean-Christophe, did not stop at the doors of the most developed country, that the answers are not simple for anyone, either the developed or undeveloped country. COVID-19 teach us humility. We saw the examples in Taiwan, in South Korea, example, which teach us that we can learn from each other. It demonstrates the need of more solidarity, more international cooperation. Many of us believe that the world before and after COVID-19 will not longer be the same. But it will be what we will do in its way. We will work to lay the foundation for a new world. I will not say a better world, or we will again miss this opportunity. We heard about several scenarios, and several scenarios are possible as to the future of the post-pandemic world. What do we want, in fact? A rise to power of cynical capitalism, and we saw some example already during this COVID-19. In this case, the most advanced nation in terms of medical research will try to take advantage of this health crisis and will turn it into an economic and geostrategic opportunity, a rise in nationalism and protectionism by obscuring the foundation of solidarity and global consensus, which was based on multilateralism and international cooperation. And we heard already many countries and many leaders saying that they will control migration, they will control economies, etc., etc. A rise in authoritarian regimes that would take advantage of temporary restrictions on rights and freedom by establishing lasting mechanisms for their control, treating thereby the most basic principle of respect for human rights and democracy. And we saw that with Hungary. We want to build a world of hope, opening as prospect for the sustainability of peace and security between our nation and our community. This world is only possible if we strengthen international cooperation based on the belief that the health security of the most powerful nation in this world is dependent on the health security of the weakest nation, that the prosperity of the most developed nation is conditioned on that of the least developed, often the holders of vast deposits of primary research. This is only possible if nations are putting in place a common governance based, a common governance base with the objective procedures and means for health security to prevent crisis and to anticipate on the next crisis. We need a world where people finally realize that protecting natural ecosystems is imperative for their survival. In fact, this is not only a health crisis, this is an ecological crisis, which turns into a health crisis, and then economic crisis. The treat in our organization and our social organization, this is nothing less than a crisis of our civilization model. Let us remember that the primary cause behind this epidemic is the harmful, even the psychopathological relationship that man maintains toward nature and especially animals. How it is possible then in a world where 80% of the species are threatened with extinction, we are still surprised at the spread of new pandemic. How it is possible that with the climate change crisis, man has not yet realized that he is creating new ecosystems. We are creating new ecosystems, new diseases, new viruses, new threats on food security, while the world population is exploding. What is happening today with COVID-19 should challenge us to consider our humanity and our relationship to nature. We are transforming the earth, so let's not be surprised if the earth doesn't want to negotiate together with us, and let's not be surprised if the earth is resisting us. This is a wake-up call from the Mother Earth, you know, a call for a global transformation, a transformation of our choices of consumption, our way of producing and manufacturing, our farming, building, moving. This might ask humankind to reinvent himself with new culture and new civilization, and more important, more respect toward nature. Otherwise, our stubbornness and our model of development will precipice us toward more frequent and destructive crises. And let me tell you that COVID-19 will not be the latest one. We were already by the Agency of Intelligence warned about the venue of a new pandemic in 2017, in 2019, and we knew the World Health Organization made many alerts too, and we just were closing our eyes and putting our blinders. So this COVID-19 will not be the latest pandemic, and the next one will be sooner than and more devastating that we can imagine. So we have the choice altogether today to remove our blinders.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Hakima, for this very strong call, and also for mentioning that this is not just a health crisis, but in a way an ecological crisis and a human crisis, and that we are in a way responsible to the planet that we are developing. And it will be interesting at some point maybe to discuss later on, how this call can be heard, and to what extent the debate will be more or less among the leaders, and that there is no real way to channel the voice from all the people around the world for some sort of a renewal. But that's when we start the discussion. I would like just to reiterate before giving the floor to Ruben Vardanyan that everyone is encouraged to send their question as of now, so that we can start the discussion immediately. Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you, Jean-Christophe. Hello, everybody. I'm very glad to be part of this fantastic panel. And also I want to say thank you to the chairman, Mr. 𝗚𝗵𝗴, for organizing this all with your team. I will try to be brief because I hope we will have more time to discussion, because I think one of the we have more discuss and debate some of the issues which I think was very correctly was raised my first speaker. And I just want to emphasize a couple important points which I think will help us to have a more debate and discussion in the future. In one hand, we are living in the best time of human era in history from point of the many criteria. The same time, if you look the last 10 years, except the economical recession, it was ideal storm when we got so many transformations been happening simultaneously in demographic situation, in social, economic, in philosophical, in moral, in consuming. And I think everybody, technology, we've been talking about co-sharing, co-living, co-working. We've been talking about aloneness. 2030, people's prediction that people will live, 45% Europeans will live alone. It was many, many things which we've been touching the fundamentals of our future. And we heard the story, let's build great America again. People was scared about future because they've been scared of losing job. That's why this pandemic, in one hand, become quite unique element. In other hand, I think the pandemic is emphasized all this crisis, all this transformation has already been happening in our world, and just make it much stronger. And in my view, uniqueness of this pandemic, in one hand, it makes us all much more local. We become local not by country, but local by sitting in our homes and being isolated with our families. In the same time, we become global because we are interconnected, because the problem really global. People first time in Armenia learning where is Wuhan or where is whatever in New York, not because of curiosity, because it's can influence their lives. This is why, in one hand, we found unique situation. We are very local. We have much more localized. We cannot travel. We cannot go to see each other, and it become very difficult. But at the same time, we become very globally connected. This is why I would say it's also the same like offline, online. In one hand, we're all now integrated by online. The other hand, we are spending more time with our families than ever in our history. Last 20 years, I didn't have a time to spend so much time with my family. And now you becoming very critical, the family relationship. And I think we are all talking about now, what will happen after the crisis, after the current pandemic will over. It will be more divorce, there will be more happy families. We're going back to the basic values about the friendship, the neighbors. I asked my employees, for example, how many neighbors you knew before crisis and how many neighbors you know now because of the crisis push you in some way to the same relation like our parents when we had this relation with neighbors. And I think we can go by many other things about family relations, the kids' relations, with the issue about how we respond of some of the things which are happening around us. And I agree, it's a very big challenge for the states, but I would say more importantly, I mean, we're getting very unique new situation. 200 years before, everything was happening with family was basically you depend on yourself. Whatever your home, you can rebuild if something happens in your home, in your country house, by your neighbors, by your relatives, by your family, and you didn't depend from the state. Last 200 years, we got middle class development, we got the state developed very strongly, and we got dependability get very high from us, from the state. And now, we're going back with the more balanced situation where the state is important and state want to get more control to us. At the same time, state lost the right to control us or the ability to control us because they cannot provide all the necessary systems of defense. That's why the dependability from your own resources, your own neighbor, your network, becoming a very important element of the future. It's why I agree the voice of the people will become much more louder because it's not anymore illusion of between the social contract which was exist between middle class and the state mainly but you behave normally, you pay all the taxes, and the state provides everything. Now, only together you can solve the problems. Only together you really need to find the solutions. And you're depending from yourself, becoming much higher. You need to make your life organized. The way how you can organize your kids going to school and online at the same time you're working in your flat, how you build this whole system which needs to provide your employees the continue working and providing services. Many things become more responsible for your own shoulder. It's why I think we have a unique situation when in one hand, offline, online extreme, in one hand, a local, global extreme, in other hand, more depending from the state and more depending from your own resource. Basically, we were going from more and more extremes version, and it's like we need to keep industrial economic situation at the same time we need to keep the life of the people. It's all choices bringing back to basic values and basic issues which the human needs to understand. Nobody can solve our problems without us being involved, and the elite especially needs to be heavily involved in discussion, debating about the future of the world, and it's all becoming more interconnected ever in history. So I'm quite confident the dialogue of civilization, which was doing this already tens of years, I think become more critical, because I don't believe any country can have a chance to build the walls and isolate yourself and say, okay, no, we are rich, we don't care, we will build our own, we will not sell the grain to the neighbor countries, we will not sell everything, we can live ourselves and we will be happy life, and others we don't care. It will not work. That's why interconnections become so clear and visible for all of us, but only together we can really find a solution of this type of the catastrophic situation like pandemic or many other things is coming. Because don't forget, it's not only pandemic is one of the crises. We're getting next crisis, the economic crisis, it can be recession, depression. We're getting next crisis about the demographics. We're getting crisis of the technology. We're going many crises can coming, and it will not be like one and next will be again pandemic. It will be different crises, and it's all will require, I think, a lot of concentration of the resources of brain, and not the money, but the brain, values, and the desire to be committed to work together.
Thank you, Ruben. Thank you for this very interesting intervention and for stressing the sort of the paradox, having on one side, sort of retreating on ourselves and let's say the fundamental environment, the family, the community, and but also in a way being much more global. And I think it will be interesting also to discuss that later on, to see how this this sort of trend will be sustained in the long run, and in a way how to make compatible in people's mind, this sort of double belonging, belong to the global community and also belong to the local community, and to say this is not one against the other. So again, I keep on encouraging our participants, our guests, to send questions. I've already received a dozen, so we have already plenty. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to KG Alphons, the former Minister of Culture in India.
Hi, Christopher, and hi, everybody else. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm from India. We're just waking up into a completely new world. And we don't even really know what the shape of the world is going to be, because it's just unraveling. The picture is not clear at all. Nobody knows what's going to happen, when it's going to end, when are we going to set off on a new kind of a chapter in human history. In fact, I've read Harari Sapiens once before, but after the lockdown, I read it twice more. How the human race is basically wrecked the universe completely. We thought we were the masters of the universe, given the mandate to manage, to conquer, to exploit. That's the right word in capital letters, exploit the world for our benefits. And look at what's happened. The kind of mass destruction of the environment about which Hakima talked about, and of course, Ruben talked about the social repercussions of that. Look at the kind of disparities we have created across the world. Look at the kind of xenophobia which existed before about people building walls. Now, what's the kind of world which we are going to kind of live in soon after the corona? We don't even know when it's going to be over, whether it's going to be over, it's going to carry on in various new kind of species of viruses going to evolve. We don't even really know. Now, I think it's time to kind of redefine, relook at ourselves. What was it humanity has been chasing for the past, let's say, from the 16th century onwards? I think before that, as Ruben and Hakima have kind of indicated, we kind of lived in self-sustaining environment where we, our family, our neighbors, maybe our village kind of lived, try to create happiness. But from the 16th century, I think it was a global chase to amass wealth. I think that is what the entire colonization process was. Amass wealth, subjugate people, and the only mandate really which every country, every people thought was, well, we need to create wealth, amass as much as we can. And they did. And they did exploit, created slavery. Now it's time to rethink. So first of all, our relationship with the universe at large. We have destroyed the universe. We have hurt it. In fact, one of our famous wise men of India, Sadhguru, some of you may have heard about it. He says, not a tear will be dropped if the human species disappears from the face of the earth. He says, human body will make good money off. So that's the kind of thinking a lot of people have, that the way we have wrecked, we don't really realize that we need to kind of work on the universe. We are here to take care of everything because we have this announce ourselves as a master of the universe, then take responsibility. If you think you are the master, take responsibility for protection of the universe, not only the animate world, the inanimate world, the rivers, the mountains, everything else, the birds and the animals and everything. So redefine our relationship with the world. This is a great opportunity because we don't exist in isolation. Secondly, the kind of fear, the kind of trauma, the kind of frustration that this corona has created. I think people had learned to live in isolation, and this is exactly what the digital technology has taught us. You don't need to communicate with your parents. Mom, I want a dinner. That comes on your WhatsApp. Mom, is coffee ready? Or the husband, are you ready for the bedroom? So I think we were so uncommunicative with ourselves in our families, in our neighborhood. How many of us really tried to learn who our neighbor was? And a lot of people who even live in apartments, 100 apartments there, how many people would they know at all? I think we had created a wall around our little selves, not even our families, little selves of our own, because with the telephone today, we don't need anybody else. We had learned to live with that. Now, with this isolation, with the quarantine, which has been forced on us, like in India, we have a complete lockdown. I think we were one of the early countries really to take this seriously, and the Prime Minister took such amazing leadership and said, let it not happen what has happened to other countries. Let's be very, very clear, and we had very clear directions and people are cooperating. So are we really, after this, going to, number one, learn to live with our own families in a better way, communicate? I mean, I still remember when President Kennedy became president, he was asked, how come you became president at 43? He said, it's the dining table in my house which created my presidency. There was a rule, 7 o'clock, everybody's at the dinner, 12 children. And whether you have dinner or not, it's not a problem of the family. He says, but every child has to speak. And what about what? Not about family, money, tuitions, about the problems of the country and the world. Can we have that kind of a family back into our shape? And again, a world in which we don't exploit. Look at the people who have died. I know some of the millionaires, I've been reading about it, billionaires who have all the wealth in the world to buy all the hospitals and doctors in the world to hire, they died due to lack of oxygen. Ultimately, amass for what? Should we not talk about a world in which we can share a little more? Shall we not? And number three, again, in this isolation, do we get back into our little shell and say, now that we are not going to churches and temples, we don't need them anymore? So are we going to redefine religion in a way in which we will talk directly to God? Or do we retreat into our shell and say, no, we don't need religion at all. We are managed without the churches and temples and mosques and things like that. So I really think this is going to be a huge defining moment. And therefore, but unfortunately for me, I did not take part in that webinar on economy. Is it not going to create a new colonialism? I have a huge feeling a new colonialism was on the way. I spoke about it in the dialogue of civilizations, which was very much, I mean, visible to everybody else. I really think now some countries, and I'm not indicating which country, is already ready to go. His factories are open. are they not going to take over the world economy and create a huge new colonial empire? I hugely suspect this is going to happen. How is the rest of the world going to find this? Are we going to say, sorry, no, we just need to all work together? Or we have a choice of being xenophobic, building walls around our country, not only that, around our little communities, around our little home. I think these are the huge choices. And what about people who have nothing? Take, for example, in India, I have 30% of people who live in one single room apartment. I'm not even talking about the apartment I'm talking about doesn't even have a wall. Doesn't even have an opportunity to quarantine. Now, a lot of these migratory workers have gone back to the villages. How are we going to open our factories? Can we really treat migrant workers, people working in your factories, as mechanisms? They are in my factory. The moment they leave my factory, I don't need to know how they live, how the children live. Sorry, I think it's a defining moment again about the relationship we're going to have, about the kind of people we need to have in this world, the relationship between the producer and the worker. I think a whole lot of stuff we need to redefine. And I think, is it a good moment for history? It's very tragic. Are we going to learn lessons? Unfortunately, man is pretty wooden-headed. I'm very sorry to say, pretty wooden-headed. He doesn't seem to learn. I think all these lessons which history should teach us doesn't really teach us much, because if we decide to be wooden-headed and not really introspect and say, now look here, I have all the time in the world. Shall we just look into ourselves and say, can we have a happier world? According to me, there are only two things for which we are born here. Number one, to be happy. To be happy, genuinely to be happy. Number two, how many people can we make happier? I don't think there is any other objective of being born in this world of our existence. So can we redefine and say, talk more about happiness? Can we do that? I think these are some of the issues which would come up, and I think more issues we will discuss as we go on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Alphons, for this also very strong statement, and also, I mean, that was very rich and covering many topics, and we will probably get back later on this risk or question about the new colonialism and in a way the power game that is also emerging from this situation, and also for stressing that. And I think this is something that is also summarizing what everybody has said, is that this is in a way a defining moment for humanity, and that we should certainly not let this moment or waste this time that could be indeed this sort of wake-up call or awareness raising. And so we have lots of questions coming from, in a way, many parts of the world, from I see from Beijing, from Chile, from all parts of the world. There is lots of questions actually about the role of, or let's say, I see from all those questions some sort of a concern to say there is indeed a great awareness today about the need for a change, to build new relationship, to think about new values and community, solidarity, and so. But how this can be sustained? Is it because people are in lockdown and that there is a fear, but that eventually in a couple of weeks we will get back to some sort of normal life, and that this sort of goodwill and common aspiration that we see in many parts of the world can be really sustained and can be, let's say, structured. There is also a concern that the voice of civil society would not be properly heard, and that the debate and the future, being the economic model, being the political model, the geopolitical model, would be kidnapped by governments, and that the voice of the people and the voice of the wisdom will not be heard. So if you agree, maybe we could start the discussion with those questions, and then we will go to maybe more specific that we have. So maybe if Ruben, you want to start, and then Hakima, and then
Hakima, I know. Maybe you go first, Hakima. It's so tough.
I mean, it's just okay, Hakima first.
Okay, how are we going to sustain the changes? And changes are needed, as you said. I think that the world is facing many pressure and many crises, and especially the world of post-COVID-19, because we should not forget the pressure on the politicians and the governance to relaunch the economy, to relaunch the schools, the universities, the factories, everything. And I think that we cannot achieve everything in the same day. But what I first, let's focus on the health crisis. If we want to find a sustainable solution for the health crisis, knowing that all the countries don't have the same level of infrastructure, health infrastructure, the same level of doctors per inhabitant, etc., etc. We need to think about to reform the Health World Organization. This is very important because until now, that was an institution which was created after some pandemic in the history in '68, something like that. And we did create an institution which has no sufficient budget for the world, very politicized, which opened its doors to private funds, so very under pressure by the private sector. We need a world organization which is financed by states, where all the states have the same voice, one country equal one voice, and we need an impartial world organization which constitute the stock of tools and materials, and which had a committee of experts and world funds to finance the less developed countries, etc., etc. We need, in fact, to sustain everything we want to do, to increase and to give the trust to the multilateralism mechanism, all the multilateralism. And what which is happening now all over the world is the threats to anything related to multilateralism, is the increase of nationalism, of dictatorship, populists, etc., etc. And of course, you were speaking about civil society. Yes, this is the one indicator of democracy. How can we pretend to build democratic democracies if we are not involving civil society? Now, with all the pressure the state are facing, what are we going to, how are we going to try to launch these changes? This is, I think, difficult. It will make time, but what we need to have and to define is the vision. What the word, as Alfonso said, what is the word we want for tomorrow? And if we have the right vision, then we can do it step by step.
Thank you. Ruben?
I think it's a really challenging situation for history of the because last 200 years, because of the Industrial Revolution, we went in extreme version of the dependability from institutions. The strong, big state was important to build because you used to build big factories, producing big tanks or airplanes, and it was all conveyor type mentality and specialization. And we all know the history of the civilization. It's always been two paths. One was by Neil Ferguson in his book. He said the square and the power, right? Institutions and network been always going hands to hands together. But because of the last 200 years, we've been very industrial. We become so much depending from institutions, especially from the state. So in my view, one of the things which we faced, by the way, in 9/11, what's happened the first time in history, the war was not between two states, but between the state and network. That's why I think we need to realize in 21st century, the transformation was happening will become back to the balance between the role of the states and role of the institutions and role of the networks of the people who will be organized in different ways. And I feel it's so strongly because we are all upset about institutions, and most of the people demanding the institutions to become stronger and more control. And we will see it, by the way. We'll see definitely after pandemic, the more security, more face recognition, more control, more chips, the integration of the human body will be required by most of the people. Nationalization and isolation, nationalism, isolation, hatedness, all these type of things is coming because people are scared. And when you scare, you're trying to demand some stupid things because your only way you can survive if somebody will defend you and you don't care about anything else. That's why I think we are facing the threat of the challenge of this fear can influence significantly to our behavior. And this is what's happening already in the United States and happens in some other countries when people are ready to give all the democratic rights or everything what we've been handling last decades just because they scare about the future. So I think one of the core elements of this organization we face in next 10, 20 years will be how we can bring back this balance between institutions and networks, how we can engage more with isolated elites. Because today, if the business person and political leader and culture leader, we're not talking to each other, we're not communicating to each other. Each of them is on silos, running in own tunnels, and they're not coming by like before is responsible for the overall big picture. Why unfortunately specialization of industrial society make not only efficiency of the production of the cars, but also make mindset very low or narrow mindset. This is why everybody is responsible for some pieces, but not of the overall big picture. That's why I can see the challenge of changing this mindset, which is coming because of this no creativity. You can become creative only when you are integrating of the different elements. That's why I'm strongly believer with the new education system. We are facing the challenge, by the way, not touching, but the huge crisis after this pandemic is the education crisis. Entire education industry will be under big transformation because it will not come back like normal anymore. And the question how education system is responding for new the requirement is absolutely nobody responding as clearly. That's why, in my view, we will entering the time of the lot of debates, a lot of discussions. Right, we need to support all the type of dialogues, and we need to also understand that the institutions is not the. We don't need to have an illusion of the institution because in the institution they can solve the problem. Because institution also consists from humans, and humans also doing some mistake, and they cannot do everything themselves. The third, which we don't touch, is the middle class crisis. 200 years ago, before 200 years ago, was no middle class. It was very rich people, very small group, and it was very poor people, and it was very small group of the middle class. Middle class came unique over the last 100 years. Because of the pandemic crisis, the first time the middle class will be hurt more than any other part of the society, because it's most of the people. I just want to remind everybody, in 1950, in the entire world was only 2 cities with 10 million people living. It's New York and now it's 33 cities with the 10 million more inhabitants living. We are in the middle class is mostly involved in the self-service, self-employed, when doing some type of the active part of the society, which we mean good citizens, and they try to be proactive. Now we've been hurt because of the future is not clear what we have in their professions. The consumer-based society is gone because no co-sharing, co-living, not requested, buying new cars and new houses, plus pandemic now killing their jobs. And this is why the most dynamic part of the society, the middle class people who've been actively supporter of the institution, will be now under big crisis. This is why I think we're facing instinct other issue, which will need to take in consideration when talking about the future discussion. Sorry to be long.
Thank you, Ruben. Alphons?
Let's
try to be as concrete as possible. I'm trying to speak also on behalf of our audience, and we receive lots of requests and say, what are the solutions? What are the response? I know it's not easy, but if we could be as concrete and as, in a way, straightforward as possible.
Yeah, number one, I think there is always a debate now today, democracy. See, today governments need to be decisive. There's absolutely no doubt on that. We need your chief executive of the country to take a decision. What do? You can't say no, virus doesn't exist. And therefore, I think people are going to opt for people who will have strong leadership. Now, here is a question. Do they become dictators? Because we need the authority to decide, or can we evolve a process of democracy? Take, for example, India. In the past 15 days, the Prime Minister of India, I think he's shown such leadership and decisiveness, but he had 4 video conferences lasting each of them for not less than 5 hours with the chief ministers of 29 states in India. Mind you, for every detail is discussed with the state chief ministers. Number one, he even had video conferencing with the village level chiefs of all over India. It's something like more than 500,000 village level leaders. He had a long dialogue lasting for 3-4 hours. So the world has the option whether you allow dictators to come in here and say, no, we need to be decisive, or you have the option of really creating a consultative democratic process. I think that is the only thing which will sustain. Nobody has the total wisdom. Nobody has. I think wisdom is with the people at all levels, especially with the people at the lowest level. And therefore, the democracy we need to kind of evolve to take this should not lead to dictatorship in the name of the coronavirus. And therefore, it must lead to a more consultative process. Number 2, education. What have we been teaching our children? You got to create money. You got to be well off. You need to have much bigger bungalow than we have, bigger cars. Is it not time to tell our children to care for all the wealth that we all had? Let us know where today. Can we tell our children at the dining table, hey, my dear child, you got to create happiness. It's not the prime minister. It's not the chief executive. You, my dear child, you take it upon yourself. You bring the change. You make a difference to the world with your life. So all these talk about, the big, I'm sorry, I'm using this word, American dream. I think, what is it about? The big cars, big bungalows, big jets. I think it's time we redefine and tell our children across the world, look here, your big dream should be about bringing happiness, healthcare. I think, what's the kind of healthcare we have created across the world? The best healthcare system is today corporatized, led by insurance companies. Can we allow that? No, I think it's time again, we get down to the grassroots, create the kind of health infrastructure. Number 1, countries need to spend much more on healthcare, support global organizations instead of saying, sorry, you are not responsible, I'm just cutting off your funds. I think it's hugely responsible. Put more funds there, put more money into really the villages where vast majority of the world live. I know urban cities are important, but let it not be led by few insurance companies. I'm sorry, the most prosperous country in the world, 30% of people possibly can't even afford to go to a hospital ever. Is it the kind of healthcare system we need? I think time to redefine. Again, back to our moral conscience to really look at ourselves and say, why are we here on the face of the earth? I think time to look at ourselves, to introspect and say, really to introspect. Keep away your mobile phones. Can we think about communities? Let me tell you that during the last 1 month, I'm in lockdown in my house in Delhi. I've never been busier during these 30 days than ever before. I've been a minister before. I've been a member of the state senate. I've been a bureaucrat before. I led a very busy life. But today, let me tell you that past 1 month, I've spent more time usefully. We created a WhatsApp group called Distress Management Collective. We are on it from morning till evening. We have 300 people. Oh my God, it's incredible. We've been able to reach food to almost 1 million people, reach healthcare, medicines. It's incredible what you can do with the digital technology and with the social media. I think it's just incredible. So pick up your phone, find out, is there a neighbor who is starving? Find out just outside your house, are there birds starving? Earlier, I used to feed 3 eagles in my house. Today, I have 100 eagles who come here because there's no food outside, whom I feed in the morning and evening. I have 25 species of birds who come here. Can't we keep just a pot of water outside your house for birds? Can't we keep a few grains outside your flat in your bungalow so the birds can eat them? Can we not? I think, please, let's look inside ourselves and become better people. I think this is a defining moment.
I have a question that, in a way, is not directly related to what we have discussed, but which is but still at the very heart also of the agenda of Dialogue of Civilization Institute, we have received questions about religion, and to what extent you think that, because this lockdown in a way has covered the period of Easter for Christian, the Ramadan, and I would be curious to hear from, because you are representing very different countries and also religious faiths. How do you see this issue of religious practice, the role of religious organization, and can we eventually foresee in the future a revival or in religious practice and religious organizations' role? Very briefly, because we would like to take one or two other questions and then to turn over to Dr. Yakunin.
If I may start very quickly, if you look the history, every time as the start of the crisis happened in a society, new religion came up or new version of the old religion. This is why I will say, unfortunately, my prediction, what we will face, the people will be scary about what's happening, and will go two extremes. One will go back to the old religion and will be like in the medieval years. The other will go to artificial intellect, will become new religion, or something which we don't expect, what people start to believe because they lost their trust and they lost their belief for anything else. So unfortunately, what I can see in future, the next 10, 15 years, we will have two extremes. One, to go back to the basic religions, will go back to the and trust to the old institutions, and some part will go to some new ideas, which can become any crazy idea. From AI will become God or somebody else, but this will be unfortunately people's behavior looking backwards history.
Okay, Hakima?
Oof, this is a very difficult question, because really I think that religion is something very deep and very personal. And for example, when you are asking a Muslim person during the period of Ramadan, I can tell you that the ceremonies in the mosques, I miss them, because this is another environment. It's more spiritual, it's more common, it's bringing people together. So I don't know, really I don't know, but I think that for Muslims, I don't think this COVID-19 will change anything to their, how do you say, foi, to their
base.
Yeah, I don't think so. Maybe we need. There is. I heard some discussion calls for building more schools than mosques, but I maybe don't have the right answer. But I think that it's very. I don't think definitely that it will change. This.
Alphons?
Yeah, I think you see people are mortally scared. They are frustrated. So I just get a feeling
not hearing
that.
you.
Well, can everybody else hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. See, now there's such a sense of frustration and fear. I think fundamentally humanity lives in fear today. And every time humanity ever faced fear, I think they've gone back to religion in a big way. So I think I agree with Ruben that possibly humanity is going to get back into religion, into more conservative forms of religion than before. But I wish something else, really, frankly speaking. I wish we go back to a little more of spirituality and not really religiosity. So, tell you about what is Indian philosophy. Indian philosophy and theology says, 𝗏𝗏ance 𝗏𝗏, just two words. It says humanity is one. I think we could go back to that, a bit of spirituality, and says, come on, let's not kill in the name of religion or have hatred, because all human tragedies and wars we see really are led by religions. One religion saying, I'm correct, you are wrong. I hope, it leads to this Indian philosophy, a better understanding of that, saying humanity is one. We all need to live together. Let's be more tolerant and more spiritual, because now people are spending time talking to their God without a church, without a mosque, without a temple. And therefore, can we talk to our God through our inner self, what we are doing today, hopefully what we are doing today, and then that takes us forward into a larger meaning of spirituality, a better relationship with God, which leads to a better relationship with every other human being and with nature.
We will get back to this question of religion. I'm taking this opportunity to inform our participants and guests, that DOC will organize in the second half of May a dedicated webinar actually about the COVID crisis and religion, religious practice, religious role, religious perspective. This is a very important issue also in the agenda of DOC. The time is flying, so I would like to come up with a sort of a last sort of question before turning over to Dr. Yakunin, and to ask each of you very briefly, some of you are political leaders, philanthropists, influencers, decision makers. If you would have a magic stick and the capacity to decide, what would be the way you would try to capitalize on this aspiration that we hear and that we feel for most part of the world for, let's say, a profound revival, reshuffling in the way the global system is organized, how to build more cohesion, how to create more solidarity. I mean, we see here and there, lots of generous aspiration, lots of goodwill, a very profound call for restoring the human values and human interaction and human belief. What do you think, if there were one thing that needs to be done to, in a way, to crystallize this moment in time and to, in a way, to make it last for long?
I'm not the politician. I can be more provocative and I can say whatever I'm thinking without being scared because I'm a philanthropist. I will say, where last 30 years we're living in a financial bubble, which people do not realize. We're living in a world where is the virtual financial market become 30 times bigger than the real financial situation in the world, economic numbers. We're living in a world where is the money is got too much power, and it's all been tried to stop by religion, but now 100 years already is not stopped by anyone. We believe it's why if I have only one element to what I can influence, I will influence this bubble will go on. I know it will be disaster. I know it will be horrible for many, many things, but I will say restart the financial system, which now over debt, over artificial and oversized by everything. I will say is definitely we went too much depending from the money, and money needs to be, all the financial system needs to revive. That's why I will say if any chance can be restart will go in financial system, which today absolutely killing everything because of the main driver of everything. It's driven by money. And we all know by our religions, it's trying to remind us how dangerous this type of being praying for money. So why I will say is the main point I will suggest to think about.
Thank you. It's always good to hear from bankers that the financial system should be profoundly reset. Alphons?
I think we adults are adulterated far too beyond for redemption. So I think if you ask me one word, ultimately, I think it's about telling our children to dream about happiness. You child, I think back to education. I think that's where I think we can begin today from our families and each village, each country, each state, and tell our children, talk more about happiness and not really about this great mad rush for creation of a, my dear child, your fundamental duty is to be happy and spread happiness. Let's put that into our education system. I think that's where we can create a new world.
Thank you. And Hakima, you were the first, you will be the last.
I agree with Alfonso. Happiness, yes, but I will be more concrete, and I will say if I have this power to change things, I will take this occasion where all the nations are supporting and funding their industry in order to relaunch the economic activity. I will then take this occasion to implement the Paris Agreement. I will take this occasion also to democratize education all over the world, even in those small villages who have no access to education with digital. This is something we experienced. I have never thought that in my country, Morocco, we will be able during 3 months or 2 months to install education via the internet. And this is something just amazing. It has been successful in Morocco, why not all over Africa and all over the world? So 2 things I will do: implement the Paris Agreement, cut fossil subsidies, and this is very important now, and take this opportunity of the nationalization of the funding of the international firms to make them respect the Paris Agreement in all the sectors.
Thank you, Hakima, and thanks for the 3 of you for really a remarkable exchange. Before turning over to Dr. Yakunin, we will be wrapping up and coming up with his concluding remark. I'd like first to apologize for the many questions that I've not been able to convey to the speakers, but it shows that there was a huge appetite for questions, and we will keep track of all those questions. I'm asking my colleagues, to make sure that we keep track of those questions and get back to you as much as we can with elements of response. Just one piece of information for our audience, that the next webinar actually will be another great opportunity for a fascinating discussion on May the 8th. So you can stay tuned on the website of DOC. May the 8th will be the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. And we will have a very high level panel as of today to discuss the 70 years after, is the world at a crossroads once again. We will have the former French Prime Minister, 𝗬𝗵𝗴𝗄. We will have the Russian ambassador to the EU, Ambassador 𝗧𝗵𝗄, and also Don Hamilton, who was the US Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. I'm now turning to Dr. Yakunin with one question, actually, that was asked by one of our guests and audience, to ask and say, is now the Dialogue of Civilization Institute a global movement? And if it has become a global movement, what kind of role it can play in reshaping sort of new world order and promoting values and development? So I think it offers a nice transition also for your concluding remarks.
No.
We cannot hear you.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
I read this question, Christoph, but first of all, I would like to thank our great speakers with their inspiring remarks. Before answering the question, I would like to apologize because due to the structure of this discussion, I have somewhat privileged position. On the other hand, it is awkward position because I will make some remarks and maybe touching the nerve, but you already will not have possibility to respond. But I'm open for future discussions or for personal exchange of the letters to tackle the matter. So first of all, I would like to remind us that the title of this webinar was Coronavirus 19 Cultures, Civilizations. And this is obvious because, Dialogue of Civilization is promoting the idea of dialogue through the whole history. more than 18 years now. And you know, answering the question which Jean-Christophe just read from the chart, I would like to say Dialogue of Civilization movement was always international. This movement does not belong to any country, to any region. So perspective, we can say global. It is not in terms of the number of the participants or in terms of the coverage of different regions of the world, but by the essence, it is of course international and it is global. Therefore, I suppose, coming back to the title of this webinar, it is obvious that we a little bit missed the aspect of cultures and dialogue in our discussion. What I mean. Listen, Jean-Christophe, you remember just before the peak of the crisis in China, we read an article in Le Monde of one journalist, I don't want to name the journalist, her. She claimed that, listen, in terms of reaction on the coronavirus crisis, democratic countries will do better than that of the authoritarian type. And then we observed the crisis in Italy. In his latest interview, Professor Fukuyama was asked something like that, and he said, in my words, that there is no difference between the political system in terms of the advance of the coronavirus attack. And that is true. So maybe one of the lessons we can take from this crisis in terms of cultures, in terms of politics, in terms of dialogue, we should just rethink what were the basic values of our societies. Doesn't matter in Asia, in Europe, in Russia, in China, in front of this attack. What were the major values which were declared? I will name: solidarity, mutual aid, and responsibility. It sounds a little bit, not to my mind, capitalistic. It sounds humanitarian. And I suppose from the point of view of cultures and dialogue, we finally should understand that we are belonging to ecosystem, as you said. We are part of the ecosystem. Not everything which is going on the earth, that is the creation of the human being. We do not know much still about the earth itself. And, we do not know about the historical precedent, ranging for millions of years. But for sure, we should not underestimate the needs for solidarity, mutual aid, and understanding. To avoid neo-capitalism, as you said, Alphons, I suppose the major thing we should concentrate now, not only on our political studies or our political activities, but also on education. Do we educate our kids properly to live in this world? I guess maybe not. I guess maybe we need to forget about some kind of theoretical structures where we are limited to take broader view, not from the perspective, he is different and he is enemy already, but as we declare in Dialogue of Civilization, different means diversity, and humanity, this is the unity of diversities. Therefore, I suppose we should remember our own examples. I don't know if our speakers had this kind of interaction with the young people, but I remember from my lectures in Great Britain in China, and even in Russia, when our kids are asked, listen, you were taught a lot about individual freedom. Have you ever discussed responsibilities? And the answer was negative. That is exactly what I mean to say that we need to concentrate on re-education of ourselves and education of our kids. And that, if possibly, is one of the lessons of this not yet finished coronavirus disease, which will continue not just to the end of this year, but at least we will feel its influence for 2, 3, and maybe for much more years. But we should learn the lessons. And that is to find the way for the dialogue of different people, different countries, in terms that the solidarity should not be solidarity even between the members of the family or between the members of the village, but solidarity between the people, civilizations. That is my final remark. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yakunin. Thank you to our guest speaker. As you mentioned, the discussion just starts now, and we are certainly willing to continue the discussion in a different DOC configuration and also in the next edition of our forum, the Rhodos Forum. But thanks again, and for our participants, keep in mind that May the 8th, the next webinar, so you can get the information on the website. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye. Namaste. Yeah.